Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Game Sack. Now this week we thought it'd be fun to take a look at some Disney-based games on 8 and 16-bit game systems.
Yeah, and there is a ton of them out there, thanks to Capcom mainly, so we should really just get right into it.
Yeah, let's start with Aladdin.
Aladdin, that's a good one.
Aladdin for the Sega Genesis was designed and programmed in about 2 weeks or something insanely short. Okay, it wasn't 2 weeks, but it did have a very rushed development cycle due to extremely tight deadlines. The first thing you'll notice about this game is that the animation is outstanding.
It is pretty and makes you really want to try it out.
Yeah, they really did an amazing job with that aspect. The gameplay, it's alright. It's not horrible, it's just your typical Dave Perry programmed platformer. As is typical with his games, it's not always clear where you're supposed to go or exactly what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, that's very true. There's a lot of wandering around, jumping on platforms, climbing ropes, and killing enemies.
Well, duh, but it's usually not hard to figure out. But the game itself is indeed fairly difficult. The music sounds awful, like they're not taking any advantage of the Genesis' sound chip here.
Yes, it is. It's faithful to the movie score, but just sounds horrible.
No, Dave, they most certainly are not taking advantage of the Genesis' sound here. It sounds like they're using as few channels as possible with very primitive instruments. Anyway, overall, it's a decent game, but hardly worth the constant praise that it usually gets.
Yeah, you could do better with this game, but you could also do worse. Just a middle-range platformer.
Just a week or so later, Aladdin for the Super Nintendo landed in stores from Capcom. The first thing you'll notice about this version is that the animation is nowhere near as good as the Genesis version. It's also a completely different game.
Different can be good, Joe. Let's not hold that against it.
Some of the colors are definitely better here. The music is just as bad, but in a different way, because there's lots of reverb and some of the music from the movie has been mutilated. There are also lots of original tracks here, though they're not tremendously good. The game itself is unremarkable and fairly tough. It's probably not worth your time to track this one down, sad to say. In 1994, Virgin even ported the Genesis version of Aladdin onto the NES. It's not pretty by any stretch of the imagination and the controls are abysmal, but you know what? I think I like the music here more than the Genesis version, it just sounds better.
Still kind of impressive that they tried to push as much animation in there as they could.
Yeah, I guess. Also in 1994, Sega made their very own version of Aladdin for the Master System and the Game Gear. Like Capcom's Super Nintendo version, this one was its own unique game. The first couple of levels showcase some of the best scrolling ever seen on the Master System.
Yeah, you can even see the sides of buildings you run by.
This game is more playable than the NES version for sure, but it's still tough to control in parts, but still, it's not bad overall. In 2000, believe it or not, a Gameboy Color version was released by Disney Interactive, which was developed by someone called Crawfish. It's basically a port of the NES version, which itself was a port of the Genesis version. It's much easier to control than the NES version, and I think the music might be a bit better here too.
That's right, the Game Boy rules. My God, they had a lot of Aladdin games back then, Joe.
Well, yeah, it was obviously quite the cash cow. You know, I'm still waiting for Aladdin to show up on Blu-ray.
Oh, way to date the episode with that comment. I mean, people from the future are going to look back and say, that is a dated episode of Game Sack.
Well, we are kind of about retro games, Dave.
Well,
Anyway, if you're from the future, let us know what you think.
yeah, and in the meantime, we're going to take a look at a magical quest starring Mickey Mouse.
Magical Quest is on the Super Nintendo. Dave never let me borrow it because he's a selfish bully. This is the first time I'm playing it, actually.
Joe, you could have borrowed it if you wanted. Here's a copy just for you.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Well, you're very welcome. I found it cheap at a thrift store. Merry Christmas, I guess.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, let me have your snatcher for your Sega CD.
No.
Oh well. Well, this game is quite fun once you get to play it. It's a typical Disney platformer by Capcom. Man, Capcom made a ton of Disney games back in the day. It has very pretty graphics and decent music that is good for the game.
You know, this kind of reminds me of the Great Circus Mystery for the Genesis. It has different graphics, but it sure seems similar since you can pick up enemies and spin them into other enemies and things like that.
That's actually the sequel, Joe. It's on the Super Nintendo as well. Anyway, the thing that makes this game stand out from the other platformers is the ability to change Mickey's outfits, which gives him different special abilities like a magician that shoots magic. The only major problem with this game is that there is no save points or passwords. This game must be beaten in one sitting.
Are there any other games in this particular series besides the Great Circus Mystery, Dave?
Actually, Joe, there is. Magical Quest 3 was released only in Japan on the Super Famicom. It's pretty similar to Magical Quest 2. A Game Boy Advance version did eventually come out in the US. Overall, this is a really fun series.
You know, that's really not a bad series, Dave. What else do you have for us?
Well, how about DuckTales on the NES?
Cool, let's check it out.
DuckTales is another Capcom Disney game on the NES. Capcom sure loved making Disney games. They did do a good job on some of them, and this is one. I like this game because I really liked the DuckTales cartoon when I was younger. The game is fun, and there is a ton of hidden items to find.
The control is wacky strange in this game.
Yeah, Scrooge McDuck can use his cane to stomp on enemies and to hit enemies like a golf swing. It's not that simple though, as to use the cane as a pogo stick, you must jump and then push down and hold B button to use the cane. To hit items and some enemies like a golf swing, you must push against an item and then hit the B button. If you just push the B button alone, nothing happens. It is very strange.
Told ya.
I like the melodies in a lot of the songs. It also has some good, colorful graphics for the NES. It's a fun game that everyone should play, and it seems that the majority of people who play it really like it. Well, Joe's the exception.
It's not what your mom said.
Hey!
And after that came DuckTales 2, also on the NES.
And as you can tell, this game is pretty much just like the first one. New levels, new sound effects, and there's a couple new maneuvers that Uncle Scrooge can do to complete the game.
Good for Uncle Scrooge.
And that, Joe, just goes to show that Disney games can be completely awesome when they're done correctly.
Indeed they can, and that brings us to the next entry in this episode.
Oh yeah? What is that?
Oh, that's the Illusion series by Sega.
Oh, I love the Illusion series.
Castle of Illusion is one of my favorite games on the mighty Sega Genesis.
Mine too.
I first saw an unfinished version of this game on some TV show, maybe Video Power or something even older, I can't remember. Anyway, the music sounded very simple, like a lullaby, that made me not want to buy it because real men don't buy games with lullabies for soundtracks.
Sure they do. I'm a real man. Joe, don't look at me that way.
Oh, come on.
And I like music from games like last week's Yoshi's Island. I like Kirby music, Animal Crossing. Hey, what the hell? All the kiddie music seems to be from Nintendo.
That's right.
Well, I still love it anyways.
Anyway, I ended up buying the game despite knowing it had music aimed at babies. But to my surprise, the music had been beefed up a little bit and is now quite appropriate for the game. I love this game to death and I still own my original copy.
Yeah, everything about this game is great, from the music to the level design and graphics to the control.
I pulled this game down from the shelf several times per year to play through it beginning to end, usually without losing a single life. Definitely the best Disney game ever made.
I hate to agree with you, but I do, Joe.
There was also a version of Castle of Illusion for the Master System and Game Gear. This was a completely different game than the Genesis version. The game's premise revolves around picking things up and moving them around.
Well, kinda. Most blocks and treasure chests can be picked up and thrown as weapons, or just to open the treasure chests. Or you can butt stomp them. There are little barrels that you can pick up and bring to different areas to help you reach higher places or to reach ladders.
To be honest, I never really understood the appeal of this game, and as a result, I always turn it off after 5 or 10 minutes. The Genesis version simply rapes it to shreds.
You're right, Joe, the Genesis version is better, but this game is absolutely no slouch. It plays a lot differently and isn't just a straight-up platformer like the Genesis version. After playing it, I am happy to see that the programmers tried to faithfully reproduce the music from the Genesis version and the themes from each level.
That was followed up by Land of Illusion, also for the Game Gear and the Master System. This one is a little better than the previous entry, but it still fails to maintain my attention for too long. You're still moving a lot of blocks around and things like that.
You know, I really like the graphics in this game. They're pretty good for an 8-bit system. You know, the music is catchy, but the tracks are too short and you get sick of hearing the same song looped throughout the levels.
The final version in the Game Gear Master System series is Legend of Illusion. The story has absolutely nothing to do with any of the previous games, and you can now throw things by default. There's a lot less block moving in this game, and that makes it better. Overall, not a bad game at all. Still not amazing or anything though, but it's not bad.
Oh, I must get this game.
Sega finally made a proper follow-up for Castle of Illusion called World of Illusion. Here, Mickey and Donald are magicians and use their capes to defeat their enemies. The game is pretty easy and short, but is still very fun. You can play as Mickey or Donald. Both Mickey and Donald have a few unique stages. If you play 2 players at the same time, there are a few unique stages there as well. Definitely a worthy entry to the Illusion series.
Yes, it is. This game is great fun. It's really fun with 2 players, I think. You can sadly beat the game in well under 45 minutes.
Still fun though.
Wow, Joe, one might think that all Disney games are as good as the ones we've shown so far.
Oh no, they really are hit or miss, Dave. In fact, let's take a look at Fantasia just to illustrate what we mean.
Oh, do we have to?
Yes, we do.
Fantasia? Ugh.
Fantasia was touted by game magazines of the time as a sequel to Castle of Illusion. They also said it was quite an improvement.
I believed every word I read, and I bought it.
Are you serious? You bought that thing?
Yep.
Oh man, that's sad. Anyway, clearly the magazines were just taking Sega's word for it or something, because this is probably the worst Mickey Mouse game I have ever played.
You know why? It was a Western-developed game, that's why. You couldn't trust the developers in the West to make good console games back then. They just had no concept of how console games played. They were used to making slow and boring games for computers of the time. Only 20% of the games made by Western developers at this time were even playable, and only 5% were enjoyable.
You can't even bounce on enemies without getting hurt in this game, and you only get 3 shots which don't replenish when you lose a life.
Every aspect of this game is a failure. The music is the best part of it, and it's not enjoyable to listen to at all.
Oh my god, just listen to this music.
Damn, Joe, that was a horrible game. Just awful.
You know, this game is responsible for more suicides than any other game that's ever been released. We're lucky to be alive after playing that day.
I know, Joe, and trust me, I am dead inside.
That explains it then. Anyway, here is a bunch more 8 and 16-bit based Disney games. Not all of them, mind you, as there are a crap ton of them, but here's what we have.
feeling a lot better now. Some of those games are actually pretty cool.
But remember, Dave, you bought Fantasia when it was brand new. $60, man.
Yeah, I know. And that's allowance money I'm never going to get back. That was money I could have easily spent on a lot of Mario knickknacks that I would have loved a lot more.
I'm never going to let you forget it. But anyway, stay tuned for next week's episode when we try something new with the show, or at least, kind of new to us anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, so stay tuned. Hi, yeah, I've got a question for you. I bought a game a while ago for my Sega Genesis. Back actually when you guys weren't GameStop, you were Electronics Boutique. I'm wondering what your return policy is because I don't like this game and I want to get my money back. Yeah, I bought it in 1991. Well, why not? Well, can I trade it in? 50 cents? That's all I'm going to get for a trade? 50 cents? Hi, Mom. How are you? Yes, I brushed my teeth this morning. Oh, well, hey, remember when you used to give me an allowance, Mom? And, well, there was one time that you gave me $60 for a game, and that really didn't work out so well. So I was wondering if I could get that money back. Hello?